Today is the big exciting day because we're going to talk about dahlia tubers today. So we have already done starting dahlias from seed, which I think is awesome, and it is so much the cheapest way to do it. But the other way of doing things is starting from tubers, and basically these are tubers. Okay, so your little dahlia that you're growing from seed will develop these over the course of the season, and then these are what you plant to grow from next year. Like everything else on social media, there are lots of people telling you lots of different things, and it can get a bit confusing and mixed up. So I'm going to try and simplify it, and it goes like this. Right now, you're going to hear people talking about waking up the dahlia tubers, okay? All that means is you plant them, okay? So the act of you planting them, and they're in the compost where they'll get the moisture they need and the warmth at this time of year and getting on a bit, means that they'll start to grow again, because you've let them kind of dry out and go dormant over winter. So this is you giving them a kickstart again. So let's do this then. The thing is, as you can see, they can be quite a bit bigger than a seed. So obviously we need to do this in proper pots and not little modules. You can also plant this, and then once it starts to sprout, you can actually then divide it up with all those little shoots and get lots more dahlia plants that way. And that, when you take a bit of the tuber that's got those shoots, is called a basal cutting. So, you know, we might be lucky. I'll maybe get to do that later on in the year. What you have to do first, before we plant these, I want you to take all of your tubers, so just one at a time, just take them. And I want you to do a couple of things. I want you to just give all the tubers a squeeze, okay? Because you've been storing these over winter, and there's two things that could have happened. They could have totally dried out, so you'll see that if they go all kind of wrinkly and papery. Or you could get rot on them, which you don't want. So have a look, and if you see anywhere on this where it looks like it's got rot, I want you to cut that bit away. And keep cutting until you have a nice clean white part again and no more rot, okay? You do not want to put rotted stuff in, it'll rot everything, so get rid of it. So there we go. So these all feel nice and firm. If any of it feels squishy like that, then that's a bad sign. That's usually rot. So you get rid of that bit. So go through your dahlias and do that. Check them all first. I'm happy. Mines are all fine. So I'm going to get them planted up. I've got various pots I've collected. So let's have a look and see. Okay, so if you look, obviously that's a bit small for this clump if I'm planting this clump of tubers. So I would probably go up to the next size I've got. It gives it plenty of room around it, plenty of space for it to grow. Okay, so for that one I'd probably go with that size. These guys are much smaller, so I'd probably go with this one for these guys. So that leads us on then to how do you actually plant these? Well, basically it comes down to you'll have a stem, which is where the original plant was cut, leaving these under the soil. So that'll be a vertical point that's really, really quite rigid. And all these tubers are coming off it at the bottom. You want to plant them always so that stem part is up. Okay, it's that simple. So I mentioned earlier then, it's the heat and the moisture that are going to generate these to start growing again. Dahlias will not tolerate frost and the cold, okay? These guys really don't like it. So I'm going to be keeping them in my greenhouse for just now, and they're not actually going to be going out into the garden until after the risk of frost has passed. What I'm doing with these just now is I'm just putting them in the pots so that I can get them going in the greenhouse, so that when I do finally transplant them into the garden, they've started and they've got shoots and they're strong and ready to go, okay? Some of them might end up in containers, but they'll be much bigger containers. This is my temporary solution for just getting them going just now and keeping them in the greenhouse. So all I've done then is I've just got a mixture of compost and a tiny little bit of vermiculite, because now, if you guys watched my video where I told you about lifting your tubers and storing them over the winter, I explained that the reason I have to do that is because it is so wet here over winter, and the tubers will rot if they have to sit in the wet for any length of time. So what I'm going to do is get them going in this nice moist compost, but I've added this little bit of vermiculite to it, just so that there's a little bit of drainage in there, so it doesn't sit too wet for too long. So let's see. And all I'm going to do, again, as I mentioned, I'm just going to set that on top of the compost mix I've put in there with the stalk up, and I'm just going to cover it. Okay, now this is the bit that may cause confusion, because you'll see this done different ways. There are folk who do this to take cuttings, and they don't cover the tubers, they leave a little bit showing. It's just to make it easier for taking cuttings. If you're not intending to take cuttings, then you can actually bury the whole thing and just leave that stem above the surface. Okay, I would say though, if you're new to dahlias, don't stress about it. Just for this year, focus on just getting them in a pot of compost, get a label on it, and then leave them somewhere warm and light until the frosts are past. So that is the first one done then. And I'm doing them by variety so that I can then label it at the end. So again, a bit of compost in the bottom, tubers in, and I want to leave that stalk proud. And I'm just making sure it's all nice and covered. Give it a good press down like you do normally. And there we go. There we go, on the surface, and I'll cover it up. I told you there was nothing scary, didn't I? Okay, there we go. So let's get labels in here. Like I say, the moisture of the compost is what's going to help get these going with the warmth. So, there we go. Next one then. Sometimes the hardest bit is just finding the right pot. Now again, stem up, because I know I have seen it mentioned online that you put things flat or at 45 degrees. It's not the case. Again, those are people who are deliberately doing things to take cuttings, but it's not that that's how you necessarily have to do it. Okay, need to get a wee bit more mix going. First one. Now, a good point to make is, although I'm leaving a little bit of the stem protruding from the top, I'm making sure all of the tubers are covered. If you leave any of that tuber uncovered, there's a chance that it could dry out. So we'll make sure it's all nice and covered. There we go, tartan. And that leaves me this one, my totally tangerine. And I think yeah. There we go. And there's two little ones that came off, so why not? I'll just let these grow on now, and the next big thing will be when I choose to pinch them out, because I'm going to try and encourage them to grow as many blooms as possible. So there's two videos I'm going to give you then. This one is when I dug up the dahlias and stored them over winter to show you how to do that, and this one is me sowing my dahlia seeds a couple of weeks ago for this year's dahlias. So I've got tubers and seeds. I hope that's the start of your dahlia journey then, folks. See ya!